Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Acacia, and today I'm going to be speaking to you about how to build resilient Flutter applications using non-deterministic data. Before going any further, by non-deterministic data, I mean when using large language models like Gemini or ChatGPT, you're never quite certain what kind of data you're going to get. Or maybe just lots of milk. A little bit about me. I'm a founding engineer at Hope Street Group, which is a nonprofit in the United States. I'm from Seattle, Washington, where I enjoy doing things that many people in that region like to do, like hiking, skiing, climbing, sailing, anything that involves a controlled fall, I tend to enjoy. I've been working in Flutter for almost 4 years now and love the cross-platform operability and the ease of usability as a developer. I've learned twice as fast working in the Flutter ecosystem because of the resources, documentation, and community available, which is why I'm really happy to be here this week. So today I'm going to start with a very brief high-level context on Hope Street Group's problem space and the app we're building and how it's addressing that problem. And then a majority of our time will be spent talking about the problems we've encountered in that process and ways that we've addressed those. So first, Hope Street Group, as I said, is a nonprofit. It's for over 20 years been building programs that expand access to trajectory-changing opportunities for all. So most recently, we've been building a Flutter application for high school students. I think here in Europe, they're called secondary school students, using Flutter and ChatGPT to help them explore career options. You may wonder why this is important. Well, it's been found that vision and ambition to pursue a specific career has a profound impact on whether a young person succeeds in pursuing that career. And instead of explaining more in detail myself, this video clip actually, it's very short, summarizes the issue, the premise of our problem well. So I'm going to play this.
Here's why that's a problem. There's a great piece of research that tracked thousands of 8th graders starting in 1988. They specifically focused on kids who had science-related ambitions, but were just average in math. They compared that group to kids who had no science-related ambitions, but they were high-achieving in math. Turns out the kids with science-related ambitions were far more likely to get a science or engineering degree, even though they weren't as good at math. What this study showed was that ambition, even at an early age, plays a huge part in people's professional outcomes. Part of why it's so important is that it helps them plan for the future. For example, if they expect to have a job that requires a college degree, then they should make plans to go to college. For that reason, the PISA survey also asks if kids expect to attend college. And it found something interesting. Among the kids who expect to have a job that requires a college degree, 1 in 5 had no plans to attend college, which means they probably won't be doing the job they expect to do. When teens expect to have a certain job, but they don't plan on getting the required education or experience, researchers who study career paths call that misalignment. One study of Australian teenagers found that kids who are misaligned at 15 were twice as likely to be unemployed or not in school at age 25. Another study tracked American 15-year-olds. They found that the students who are aligned or over-aligned, which means they plan to get more than enough education for their expected job, these kids had higher wages throughout their career compared to misaligned kids. But researchers who study these career pathways have a pretty good idea of things we can do to help students think more clearly about their future. For one, young people need to explore various careers, maybe by visiting workplaces. And it's useful if they've experienced a workplace by working part-time or volunteering. Those experiences should help them think about what job they expect to do and make plans accordingly. But most students don't get these opportunities. Only about 40% of students in this survey said they participated in job shadowing or worksite visits, and a similar percentage of kids said they participated in job fairs. In other words, 15-year-olds aren't getting the support they need to answer this question. When we don't do the work of helping kids think through their futures, it's disadvantaged kids who suffer the most. Among the most affluent kids, only about 1 in 10 are misaligned. But among the poorest kids, about 1 in 3 are misaligned. So we entrench the inequality that already exists. This is every kid who answered the survey.
So to address this problem of misalignment and maybe give these kids better vision and maybe ambition, we're building this Flutter app to help the high schoolers explore careers. With this app, they can generate professionals that they'd like to talk to and ask any kind of question like about career journey, salary, etc., anything they can think of. Since December, we've launched in 4 schools in the US. The app is still in beta. Being a nonprofit, it's completely free to schools and students. You can imagine we're still learning a lot about students and also how to harness large language models to generate content for us. As you can see from these screenshots, the AI character sits at the center, at the core of our user experience, and is the main value prop for the students using the application. So let's talk about generating these AI characters. I thought this meme was funny. Before, we had access to models like ChatGPT for development. We may have manually generated thousands of characters, stashed them in a database, and queried them from there. As a front-end consumer, you would know the shape, content types of the data you get from the database. And there's a contract, a server-client contract that defines this data, and that is what we build upon. Now, using these models as a data source, primary data source for us, you ask for a character of a helpful assistant and you get, hey, how can I assist you? Or maybe, yo, what you need? The contract isn't guaranteed. Shape, content, type is not a given. Your Flutter app or mobile front end or the API between the two has a new set of responsibilities to make sure the data is as the front end needs and expects. So for us, the goal is to deliver a consistent and reliable experience to our users while building in this new world of non-deterministic data. Quality content generation can be addressed with improved prompting and parameter tuning, but we can't place our whole user experience assuming the right shape, size, and type in the hands of a model when we're not completely certain what data will be returned. So in other words, prompt engineering is not enough. And so how do we wrangle non-deterministic data into the shape, size, type that we need for a reliable user experience? Here is a list of steps or ways that we've taken to ensure a solid data structure, content typing for UI consumption. Some of these you're probably more familiar with. This is not meant to be a formula or a playbook, rather just a menu of options where each will improve your app's resiliency. We applied them at different layers of our application architecture based on our app maturity and use cases. Our app is still very young, and your circumstances might be different. So we started in December, like I said, on ChatGPT 3.5, and are growing alongside these APIs. Recently, for example, JSON validation was added, which resolved a lot of the issues that we've had to work around. And it's possible that these tactics will maybe be unnecessary with upcoming releases. We don't know. But for now, here's what we've done. When we first started, we just took this JSON structure with descriptions for each field of what we needed, and fed it to the model. And it did okay. But you'll notice, if you look closely, there's some problems with the content generated. For example, doctor is not technically part of a character's name, rather part of their role title. Age and annual income would ideally be integers. University of Excellence is not a real school. And $85,000 a year may or may not be a realistic salary for this character. So the first thing we did and typically do is improve the prompts, and it got us about 80% there for the data that we needed. We're at Fluttercon, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about prompting. Just know that adjusting these field descriptions, the prompts by field, improve the type quality and size. We also provided API parameters to see how it affected character generation. For example, you'll see temperature here. Temperature is like, imagine you're at a buffet and you have all these options for food. You're trying to decide what to pick. A lower temperature means, I like pizza, I'm going to choose pizza. It's a more confident but less creative choice. Whereas higher temperature makes you try lots of different things, like maybe sushi today, pizza tomorrow, and currywurst the next day. I tried that and it was really tasty. Top P, top percentile, this setting changes how many options you consider when making a decision. So it's like how big your buffet is. A lower top P means you're more likely to pick from only the most popular choices, like only looking at the top two items on the menu. This makes your decisions more predictable and limits variety. We've played around with both of these, and overall they just affect how creative or chaotic was another word the model responses are. On the one hand, for our product use case, we need more chaos and creativity to generate a broad range of characters because we want students exploring into the edges of what's possible. But on the other hand, we need the field values to be accurate and representative of the real world, of real professionals, because we want the professionals to be useful to the student and also not set them up for failure with unrealistic expectations of what is possible. So we optimize for breadth, more creativity. This also means that we've had to mitigate for more hallucinations in the field, the generation by field. So to drill down by field, we use something called function calling. You'll notice generate professional profiles tool here. That's a function call. Basically, a function call is a tool that you hand the assistant that's generated as an option to execute your prompt. In our case, because of our prompts, it uses this tool every single time. But the TLDR is that it gives you more granular control over the type and content of your JSON by field, by key. And even with function calling, the model may still hallucinate parameters, or hallucinate in general. Like in this case, if you look closely, you'll notice job is missing entirely, which would blow up our UI. So for this case, we add validation. A simple validation in our case, so we just check that all keys expected are present, but validation can be more or less robust. You can check for whatever you need. In some cases, I guess the main point here is that first we try to address with prompting, and if we can't get it with prompting, then we implement validation. You don't want to over-validate for stuff that can be fixed with prompting. In one case, the LLMs will be lazy, and so we had to check that a field was long enough. And so that was funny. Before function calling, we had about a 60 to 70% success rate of characters passing. Characters that don't pass just get discarded. And after function calling, we're at about 90 to 99%. So that's Good. Better. For our application prompting, API calls, the config, the validation were implemented in our business logic layer. That's where it made sense for us. And what about, though, that last 1 to 9% of potential inconsistency? So even with function calling, good prompting, validation. In these cases, we would use sanitation. So we would just coerce the type here. And in the case that didn't work, we set defaults. Now, typically, I wouldn't suggest setting defaults if you're depending on data from a NoSQL SQL database, because in those cases, you want your app to fail early and loudly so that you can get to the root cause, right, and fix it. But in this case, since we're generating random data, when it's 1 to 5% likelihood that we'll even hit this code path, I think it's okay to set a default here. And some defaults for us are there's rationale behind them. In the case of 25, we know students will relate to a 25-year-old professional more than a 58-year-old. So we set it to 25. You could randomly generate this. And then in other cases, we have just a placeholder so that if we do get here, our UI doesn't break. So let's see. Additionally, the model will sporadically do things like not capitalize. So you just have to keep an eye on this. And in this case, we do transformations. So for job title to look nice, we would like it to be capitalized. And so you can apply that where necessary. And for us, implementing sanitation defaults, transformations, we did in the models. I say models, it's really your data layer, whatever that looks like for your application. Experientially, for me, it's the models. Since we're a flatter and simpler architecture right now, and very young in our journey, you may have a more sophisticated and mature app. So this stuff, it would be more appropriate to implement it elsewhere. And finally, if you're generating data via LLMs dynamically based on user input, there are some additional considerations, should the user input have a fixed length, be capitalized or moderated? These are questions that came up while we're testing with students. This is my student here. Gen Z, Gen A, I guess. And yeah, so we had some of these students attempt to generate less appropriate jobs. At first, we tried to address this with prompting, but we learned that ChatGPT was remarkably biased toward generating all kinds of jobs, especially when it came to sex work. And as you can imagine, the schools that we launched in did not hold the same position. So we had to find another way to moderate. So instead of trying to change character generation with the prompting, we moved up the chain of events, and now we moderate the content before it's submitted for the completion request. We use this part of the API. You'll notice if you look closely at the categories here, it's sexual, hate, harassment, self-harm. Those don't map one-to-one with a job description or job title. So we did use this, but we also used LLMs to generate our own list of inappropriate titles, including slang versions and common misspellings of those words. And I've since learned that there is another tool called embeddings, which you can use in combination with cosine similarity to also identify these groupings and then use that to test against. We haven't implemented that yet, but maybe soon. So last, and this is more basic front-end awareness, possibly more of an edge case, I don't know. Make sure that when your user input directly impacts your response or result, in this case, we have custom generation where our prompting specifically says whatever the job title the user inputs, you need to make sure that that's the job title for the character, that your UI can handle this input. So, for example, we had students generate exceptionally long job titles, or this is like one edge case, and if your UI isn't ready to handle it, then it might break. So you'll see like multi-line job title here. So that's actually it for today. I think I moved a little quicker than expected through this. Like I said, these are not meant to be it's not meant to be a formula or a playbook, and rather like a menu of options, and that you can choose to improve resiliency of your app. And then also we are growing alongside these APIs. Like we're kind of trying to stay on the edge as much as we can, and we don't always know what's coming. So it's possible all of these won't be necessary within the next year. We'll see. If you'd like to check out our app, if you would like to use it to explore your next career step, you can. It's free. It's on the iOS App Store here. Thank you so much for your time. And that's it.